When the spawn meets world, spawn meets world. When the spawn meets world.
What up, comrade?
What up, bruh?
And welcome to Bruh Meets World.
Bruh meets world. Actually, maybe we could do like a
Monday, Tuesday, happy days. I knew where you were going with it.
When it's Bruh meets world.
So Michael Jacobs really loves this time.
All right, I'm just gonna throw this out there for our listeners. Me and Ceej do not like time jump episodes. We find them very cheesy. We find them pointless, as in this episode. There's no need for it. And I also want to point out the fact that only white people can go back in time. So
Absolutely.
That's...
Well, I memean, here's the thing. I will say, I remember a very iconic Family Matters episode where they do a noir. Like, I don't know, do you remember that one?
Bruh, all of these time jump episodes are pointless. Every single TGIF show does it, and it's always dumb.
And I don't disagree with that. But just even how they have him go back in time. You're like, okay, first of all, he's dead.
I'm sorry. Let's pause. Let's pause. Let's pause because I feel like we jumped right into this episode with pure aggression and we missed a bunch of beginning stuff. So maybe we can just do a tell me about it to start us off.
Well, how about we start with telling the people who we are, and that this is episode 65.
Guys, this is what this episode has done to us. I just want to point that out there.
I'm Ceej.
And I'm your boy, TC.
And everything that we said above. And we're just going to get into this because I'm going to tell you guys right now. You probably saw it when you looked at the timestamp. This is not going to be a long episode.
I can't imagine why it would be.
So let's get into the Tell Me About It.
Tell me about it.
This is season 3, episode 19. I Was a Teenage Spy. Corey gets a shock when a microwave mishap transports him back into the 1950s, where his post-Cold War knowledge of Russia's space experiments get him mistaken for a spy. I have so many things, mostly why.
Should we quickly do the roll call? I want to find out. I mean, we have Hunter Shanzarelli. We have like all these new characters.
What's her name? T-Bone?
Something like that. I don't know.
So anyway, roll call. We have Tom Bosley and Anson Williams, who are both from 1950s sitcoms, as themselves, and then Pat Morita, who I also believe is
on Happy Days.
Yeah, exactly. Who plays Wise Man. So
don't know how I feel about that from a perspective of casting the old Asian man to be the wise man.
God.
Let's talk about this fondness for the 1950s that we've talked about this throughout the podcast, how Michael Jacobs seems to be a very big fan of Happy Days. I'm sure he jizzed his pants at the opportunity to do this. Why is this episode a thing?
Again, I can't think of anything other than at the time we were doing 22 episode seasons and they needed a filler.
Why is it that Feeney gave them a final for history in the last episode and now Corey is doing a history project about Sputnik? What is this for?
Absolutely. Because, like, what is time in the Boy Meets World episode? Like, anyone who watches The Good Place, have you ever seen it?
Mm-mm.
Time is not linear. It kind of makes this design that says Jeremy Bearimy. Like, and that's like in cursive, and like time is that. Like, it's just always all over the place. And that's exactly what I think Boy Meets World's timeline is.
Yep.
It's just like at any point in time, like, I would not be surprised if season 6 has us in like
Dude, this is the first of many time jump episodes, and to be honest, I'm not a fan of any of them. Let's quickly talk about this because I want to get this episode over with. Corey goes back in time because of a microwave.
Yes.
Is there anything wrong or false about that assessment?
A lot. I mean, at least with Back to the Future, we got a DeLorean. Or like,
This is, and you know what?
Aliens
I
make it a dream. Like,
it's a dream segment. Like, I get it, but still, like, the microwave thing is silly. I want to quickly talk to you quickly about this paper because Corey is upset with Sean because he plugged something in, and because of that, his computer wiped his paper. I just want to quickly ask you, can you remember a time in high school where you were doing, our college, where you were doing a paper and the entire thing got erased? And you
absolutely. Everyone, like, I don't know about now because so many programs have like automatic save.
This was not a thing when we were in school.
But there was just so many times, I'm sure, like just generations of people, especially ones who worked with computers, or like I would imagine like even typewriters kind of like had the issue every once in a while. But just the idea of you worked on this thing, and yes, maybe I waited to the last minute, but you got gold. I pulled out of my crack the best that I could, and it was at least gonna get me a passing grade, and
And it always happens when you procrastinate to the last damn minute, only for you to hear your mom's voice in your head going, "That's why you don't wait to the last minute, T."
Absolutely. It was very, very much. Speaking of T, TL is Topanga's name in this episode.
Can we talk about the Russian influence? That seems pretty relevant, I guess.
Very much so. I mean, I do love, like, it's kind of mocking 1950s understanding, so I will give it that.
I mean, they are making fun of this whole, like, Red Scare. This person may be a communist.
Again, surprisingly relevant.
Sure, surprisingly relevant.
Sadly
but
relevant?
Not to the story of Boy Meets World.
Not at all.
This is like a different show. This is like, do you remember that show where like that boy and that dog would like go through like the different history points? It was a cartoon.
Mr. Peabody and someone else.
Sure. That's what this episode is.
Yeah, kind of. It kind of does feel like that.
It feels like a Bill and Ted, like we're going to go back in time, we're going to learn a little something about history, and we're going to come back all the wiser from it.
But it doesn't even teach a lesson that's relevant to, as you said, Boy Meets World, or like one that he remembers, so to speak. It's just a fun escapist,
and it's
episode.
very much a Back to the Future kind of vibe of him like going back, saying his name is Brad Pitt, like
Brad Pitzer,
and he just like is really playing with this whole history. Like he's in on the joke. He understands that he's in the past, but no one else does. And
also they do how old? Well, you know what? This episode allows it, but there is a few allusions to Back to the Future, including "Great Caesar's Ghost," which is a Back to the Future quote said often by Doc. So,
the one thing we learn about this is, I'm sorry, there's a few things we learn about Sean and Topanga that I don't know are relevant outside of this dream sequence. Does Topanga really like going to the zoo and seeing the giraffes? Because we've never seen that before. We never see it again. Is that just some random dream fact that doesn't matter at all?
Yes. And then
Sean never has had a friend. Corey is his first friend. He doesn't understand how friends work. It's not even that they're back in time. They're in like an alternate dimension. It's so strange and bizarre the way they structure this episode.
Absolutely. Like I will say in this episode, because we did get someone recently who talked about Girl Meets World, and they do a very similar thing in Girl Meets World, where it's like the 1960s. But what they do there is that we are seeing Riley, who is Topanga and Corey's child. We're seeing her grandmother and her relationships, and of course everyone's very much like this. Like there's a bunch of people who mirror the people that she knows, and it's supposed to be an origin story, and it's supposed to actually be the past. Like we learned that this character that Riley was doing is the one who gives Topanga her name. She's like, oh, if I ever have a daughter, I'll name her Topanga because Topanga feels like home, or something like that. It's like it's a whole thing. You're like, oh, it's supposed to be like that's why she got the name Topanga. This episode does none of that. Like
no, because it's not based on anything. Corey's parents in this sequence are Russian spies. Boris and Natasha. Are you fucking kidding me? Like
I love it.
Here's a question for you too, and we touched on this a little bit before. Only white people can go back in time, because I have to tell you, sending me to the 1950s is fucking terrifying.
Absolutely.
I don't want any part of it. I don't want any part of the 50s, the 60s, honestly, the 70s and 80s,
Send me some parts in LA now.
Even now. Like, I don't want to go back. No person of color, no minority is thinking, hey, back then, that's when America was great.
Absolutely. So, yeah, this is very much a TV show that only can happen with a predominantly white cast. And even then, like, I will say, like, I remember there was an episode of Living Single where they do this, and they do it. But again, it's played for fun, and it's played for, like, they're not trying to make they're not trying to do anything but have fun, and the point is like this is music and it's fun, it's all this other stuff. Like this just felt filler.
You
and,
know
like,
what my main problem with this is too? That we've seen dream sequences such as Quarter in the Jar and Then There Was Sean
yes,
that not only are fantastic as far as humor and relevance and just being like having actual fun with the concept,
Mhm.
but it supports the ongoing storyline. You have Sean wedged in between Corey and Topanga, and this is the manifestation of that.
yeah,
What is this the manifestation of?
yeah,
This is Corey fell asleep watching Happy Days.
absolutely. Also, all right, so a few little quick notes that I had. First of all, turned on by Turner moment. Poindexter look working for me with Turner. Like
I'm a pass.
I mean, you don't have to, but for me, I was like, yes, this Turner, and I think it's just because we've gotten so much of the Turner's a hunk and like the I'm a '90s dreamboat. I was just over, so to see him have a different look, I was like, okay, you know what? It's shaking things up for me.
You know what? Obviously, I've never been as big of a fan of Turner, but I will say this: I think he hit his peak with the tank top episode in season 2. Ever since then, especially this season, they're aging him with his suits and his attire. I think even next season he gets a haircut. Like they're dwindling down the things that made him like a sex symbol.
Okay, and then additionally, there is a
Nerdy Eric.
Well, Nerdy Eric, which of course, like, there's all these alternatives, but one thing that I thought was interesting is in the classroom scene where Brad Pitzer is, talking to them about Russia and all this other stuff.
Sure.
There is a black girl, and I was like, integration did not hit Pennsylvania until 1968. And this is supposed to be
even really probably after in most
and
places.
this is 1957, so I don't know what universe you're in.
What happened is they had the same group of extras that they used for every episode, and they were just like, "Hey, here's your costumes. Go for it. We're just gonna turn an eye to this."
Also, Eli the Beatnik, that felt very racially charged. Does it not?
I mean, what else were they gonna do with this guy? Like,
I mean, first of all, we haven't seen Eli in like a few, but
is Eli? I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time remembering this episode because I'm purposely trying to delete it from my mind. Is Eli in the Chubbies in this episode? Is that where we see him?
yes, he's again. They go to meet like
Yes.
the wise
Yes.
man, like,
A colored man would not be allowed in a restaurant with these white kids.
This is what I'm saying. But like, not only are we like.
The sit-ins haven't happened yet.
Not only are we glossing over this, but when we do, he is, of course, like this artist, beatnik. Like it's a very stereotypical thing, and
I'm so sorry. We have the episode playing in the background, and they just gave Corey the chicken mask to get him out of jail. This episode is ridiculous.
Absolutely. Oh yeah,
And Sean having a girl hidden at his hideout, just waiting for him to do whatever with.
Shanzi Hunterelli.
Jesus, dude, this whole episode is just ridiculous. Is there anything you liked about this episode?
I like Rocky and Bullwinkle. So the Boris and Natasha thing was fun to me.
I will say the one thing I do like is that I like surprisingly that this episode is relevant because of the Russia angle.
Exactly.
Because those foes have come back in the big way. But I also like Corey and Topanga in this episode.
I said there was chemistry.
There's chemistry there. We learned a little bit. Again, I don't know how much of this is actually Topanga or what Corey's envisioning of Topanga, but they actually seem to have a chemistry here that we haven't seen in some time. So that was the one thing that I was just like, okay, I'm here for this, I guess. They're having a lot of fun with this. Topanga's wearing a ridiculous wig. Like, it's all good fun in a way that I don't care at all about.
Exactly. I just think that this episode contributes nothing. It needs nothing. It creates more problems than it solves.
You could not watch this episode and it would make no difference to your understanding of the show.
But also, it's a time era that we constantly go back to.
I feel like that was a 90s thing. I feel like that's a boomers thing because boomers were basically the adults reminiscing about their childhood.
Well, so I just found out that I think 2019 to 1990 is the same as 1990 to 1961. I didn't do the math just now, but I did see something recently that was like, oh, hey, by the way, the reason why we're seeing all these 90s shows and stuff is like, hey, remember when you were a child and you saw all those 60 things? Well, that's exactly what we're doing.
100%, 100%, and so that's what I think. That's why I think we're seeing a lot of this happening here because of the boomers. But it's one of those things to where they had this view of the 50s that was not entirely accurate.
Well, again, it's one of the, like, again, to bring up another meme, which I love, is whenever people are like, why do you miss the 1950s? We still have milkshakes and racism.
Yeah.
like, those are still around. So, like, what do you miss? And I think it's like, we miss being able to look at this, overlook it,
No,
like
the
not
only
really
thing
examine
people
it.
miss is not having to fucking go to restaurants and schools with people of different races. That's what they're talking about when we talk about the 1950s.
I mean, but I will say, because we know of Michael Jacobs being someone who is constantly trying to,
Recreate Happy Days.
well, no, I'm just like, he is trying to teach lessons and push the envelope forward. I will say that I don't think that that's what he misses, but it is one of those things to where he doesn't see the problem with having Mr. Miyagi. And I may be racist for even assuming he was Mr. Miyagi.
No, he is Mr. Miyagi.
I wasn't sure. I'm just saying I didn't do research, but he doesn't see the problem with having him play these stereotypical roles.
Well, he does play the same. He plays the role of the restaurant owner on Happy Days, which is why he's half of that here, but also half wise man because Asian.
That's what I'm saying. Why did he need to be in the wise man, or like
why is Eli a wise beatnik?
Exactly. It's just like those things they don't see a problem with, because for them it was just good, harmless fun. So much as for them 10 years ago with with them Pretty in Pink or stuff.
Sure.
We just weren't examining things, or even if we were, no one cared as much as we care now.
It was a pre-woke time, guys.
I mean, so it was like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So. I honestly don't have much more to say.
I also don't have much more to say either. It's good to see Pat how do you say his name?
Pat Morita.
Pat Morita. It's good to see Pat Morita again. He did great things for the Asian community. He was a fantastic actor of his generation. Other than that, it honestly felt like Michael Jacobs was like, hey, we have Pat for an episode. What can we do?
Again, for me, it just feels like they had a 22 episode order and someone was like, hey, how about we do this? And he was like, yes.
Okay, so one of the things I will point out is that in the next time travel episode where they like go to war or something,
yeah,
I think it's like season 5. There is a TGIF was doing a special where that entire Friday night was filled with time jumps.
Yeah.
And I think Salem from Sabrina the Teenage Witch actually makes an appearance because he jumps from episode to episode of the series.
I kind of love that.
There was a tie-in at least to where we could be like, okay, I can see why you did it. I do not recall that being the case for this episode. And again, there's no point in Corey doing a report since history has ended in the previous episode.
I think we're supposed to have this whole It's a Wonderful Life Wizard of Oz moment where he's just like, you were there, and you'll always be there for me, Shanzi, and Topanga, I'll always care about you.
I think the reason, literally the only thing to take away from this episode is that I think they were trying to reestablish this romantic connection between Corey and Topanga to lead to the events of like the Disney
next episode. Yeah.
So I think that's really the only point of it. And honestly, it's really unsuccessful with that as well. So
absolutely. The only other thing I was going to say is like towards the end of the episode, he gets shocked again. And I'm like, yo, fix that socket. Like, that's like legit a lawsuit. Like, or, it's like...
Yeah, actually, Corey, you've been dead the entire episode. This is your last glimpse before you fade out.
Absolutely. So that's my only thing. But yeah, honestly, I don't know what you guys want from us. We did what we could with this. If you really feel like it,
yeah, please let us know if you like this episode. Like, I feel like for someone, this is the episode that they just, like, love. Like, this is the episode that they remember from their childhood and for whatever reason has a part in their life. That was not the case for me.
And Mazel, because, honestly, I could have done something else with my time. Okay, so...
grade?
Yeah, what...
bro moment? What do you want to do here?
Honestly,
My bro moment is ignoring integration.
a very good one, because as we've mentioned, there are lots of things where I'm like, okay, so we're just whitewashing history right now.
100%.
And if you're gonna go and do the 50s, do the 50s.
Yeah.
And then grade. What grade are you giving this?
I'm giving it a D. I'm giving it a
Okay.
solid D.
Honestly, like I feel like
Actually, you know what? I will. I feel like that's too harsh because there are funny parts of the episode.
I gave it a C because, and I only gave it a C because, and if you look at my notes, I actually give it a C plus. But as we've talked about it, I'm landing on a C because it does have a 3-part structure. It does, like, it does
C minus for me.
It does like the bare minimum, and we've seen worse episodes.
I think what bothers me the most is that the tail end of the season is actually filled with some pretty decent episodes, like some really great episodes.
Which again, filler. That's how it feels.
And this just feels like trash. It feels like you remember when there was an avocado shortage and California had reported that restaurants were mixing soy into their guac to fill it in. This is the soy in the guac.
Well, I don't know if anyone remembers, again, and I keep saying this, but like very often TV shows have like a order, like an episode order that they have to fulfill, but then like they get budget cuts or like whatever, and so like they're like, you have to do an episode but with this amount of money, or like just these are the things that we can do. And this feels like one of those episodes, like in what is it called? In God, why am I blanking on it? Breaking Bad. In Breaking Bad, the Fly episode in the last season was specifically written because they had a budget cut, and they were like, we have to do the episode order, but this is like, we're gonna have to make it within these
sure.
limits. And I feel like very much this was a situation where ABC was like, we said 23 episodes, we will not accept 22.
I really don't, and this is like a prime example of why I really feel like the 23 episode structure model has fallen apart, and why like 8 to 12 episode series
is fantastic,
are doing so well, because they can just focus on like the stories that need to be told. They don't have to do filler.
And even with 12 episodes, sometimes you're like, did we need that last one? So I cannot imagine how terrible some shows would be if we actually doubled the order.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Okay, so homework. Do you have any?
I saw Rocket Man on a plane recently, and I enjoyed it. I saw the trailer for this at the same time I saw the trailer for Bohemian Rhapsody, actually, and I just kind of rolled my eyes. I was like, wow, Hollywood's running out of ideas. I saw these trailers back to back. But I actually enjoyed this more than Bohemian Rhapsody, because I actually did not like that movie. The lead actor is great. He does his own singing. The movie has this really trippy, almost Moulin Rouge quality to it. And it was one of those things where they did not hold back on the history of Elton John. He's like, I have fucked everything that's moved. I have taken every drug available. And they show it in a way that I feel like they kind of watered down with Freddie Mercury. So Rocket Man, if you're on a plane, it's a fine movie to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I know Elton John had a very big hand in writing his movie, so
yes,
I think like you're getting his truth instead of like some producer being like, and this is what happened.
Well, and also with if you know anything about the Queen movie behind the scenes drama, Sacha Baron Cohen was originally supposed to be Freddie Mercury,
and
but
he wanted to
like tell like what Freddie Mercury, the crazy shit he actually did, and the band was like, we kind of want to focus on the music and make the band look great.
Exactly.
And so that's why, like, when I was watching this movie and I was like, oh, they're just singing the entire time. They're just going from song to song in the studio.
Musical.
It felt very much like a Glee episode to me. And that's why I think Rocket Man surprised me so much, because it didn't feel like that.
Okay. So for me, my homework is, speaking of I Was a Teenage Spy, the new trailer for James Bond, No Time to Die, just came out. And I'm a huge James Bond fan.
I've never seen a James Bond movie.
I don't even know what to say to that. So I'm going to say,
I'm very surprised that you have James Bond is not a black thing. He's not that thing that like you could go up to any black person and they're like, oh yeah, of course we've seen all the James Bond movies.
I agree with that, but to me as a cinephile, James Bond is a cinephile thing, and James Bond for me has always been kind of like I don't know. I just always responded to it at a very young age, and then the reboot with Daniel Craig has also been a very fun, and like some are hit or miss, but like what I'm going to list is we're at that time of year where we're at the time of the decade where people are listing some of their favorite movies in the past 10 years.
Which is such a fun discussion to have.
Absolutely. And Skyfall, which is a James Bond movie, is on my list. Like, Skyfall is such a good movie.
And that's so funny because I've heard Casino Royale was really good.
A lot of people, there's a lot of debate online on, like, if Casino Royale or Skyfall is better.
But the fact that both of them are in consideration makes me want to watch them, I guess.
And Skyfall was Casino Royale rebooted the franchise. Skyfall was the one that they really tried to make an Oscar movie, and it got the closest to that feat. Because I didn't know this, but like James Bond movies used to just be like B movies. Like that was like their thing, and then Skyfall specifically was like, no, we're gonna take the Dark Knight approach and really try to make this franchise like artistic. And the song alone is award winning, but like Skyfall is definitely one of my favorite James Bond's movies. And since we were doing a Teenage Spy, I was like, yeah, let's do this.
All right, dope. Awesome.
All right, so wrapping this episode up, thank you guys for listening to Broad Meets World. Remember, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all the places. Leave us a rating. Reach out to us at Broad Meets World or email us at broadmeetsworld@gmail.com.
You can find me on Instagram @braverme, @braver.me, and you guys can also find me on our Movie Makeover podcast, where if you're curious about people's feelings of movies from the past 10 years, me and Ceej actually dive into a bunch of great movies and not so great movies and give you our opinion. So if you haven't checked it out yet, I encourage you to. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, all right. So you guys remember to dream,
To fucking try,
and to avoid faulty outlets.
do some good, guys.
All right, later, bros.
Later, brah.